At dinner, my mother slid a pale envelope across the table toward my sister. Inside, $150,000 for her new home. My father didn't flinch. He just turned to me and said, "You're the disappointment. We invest in those who succeed." The room fell into a hushed stillness. Utensils hovered midair. Grins faded. I didn't cry. I folded my napkin, rose, and left without a backward glance. That night, I didn't plead for recognition or affection. I began something they could never anticipate. When I was 12, I had constructed a suspension bridge from wire and drinking straws for the state science competition. It held a full textbook without bending. I won first prize. I remember standing on the gym stage scanning the audience for my parents, 2 vacant seats right at the front. They were in Denver, attending my sister's beauty contest. That evening, I brought the model home, pride radiating from me. My father glanced briefly and returned to the television. "Odd child," he muttered. "What sort of daughter fiddles with machines?" My mother said nothing, merely brushing my sister's hair as she displayed her Little Miss Sunshine trophy under the living room lights. That moment lodged in me, sharp and unyielding. It wasn't the words themselves, it was the silence after. The empty space where love should have been. Growing up, I realized that affection in our household always came with conditions. Every smile, every gift, every acknowledgement depended on whether you made them look good. My sister was the golden child, showered with praise, second chances, and excuses. I was the shadow, the one expected to endure, to thrive without support. I worked nights to fund my own college tuition while they covered my sister's fully. I graduated with distinction, landing my first role as a structural engineer. I sent photos of my bridges, my apartment complexes, my steel frameworks climbing skyward. My father's only response: "Still renting." Every call became an assessment. Jessica's achievements versus mine. They never asked about me. They measured me by how closely I mirrored her success. Still, I clung to hope that one day they would see me for myself, not just as a failed comparison. That hope finally shattered the night of that dinner. When my father said, "We invest in winners," a switch flipped. I stopped chasing validation. I stopped justifying myself. I began understanding the difference between silence that destroys and silence that shields. I packed up, left Colorado Springs, and drove back to Denver. No calls, no tears, just the hum of the tires and a silent promise. If they wouldn't recognize my worth, I would create it brick by brick until the world could see. Losing my family was one kind of emptiness. Losing my job was another. It happened on a gray March morning, the kind where even the air feels exhausted. The company had been struggling, but I believed I was safe. I worked diligently, met deadlines, stayed late. Then the layoff list was read aloud. My name was there, unalterable. I stepped into the snow, clutching the termination notice. The cold was sharper than I expected. I stood on the curb, staring at passing cars, wondering how many times one could rebuild from nothing. That night, I sat in my apartment, watching the city lights reflect faintly in the window. The silence inside was no longer soothing. It was heavy, echoing every small sound. I opened my phone, saw my family chat, and found another photo of my sister in front of her new house, champagne in hand, our parents grinning beside her. The caption read, "So proud of our youngest daughter." I stared at it for a long time before typing one final message. "Thank you for teaching me to stand alone, even through your cruelty." I sent it. Then I blocked their numbers, deleted the group, and watched the screen go dark. For the first time, there were no spectators, no judgments, just me. Fear surfaced first. What if I stumble again? What if they were right? But beneath that fear, something else flickered: freedom. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. I had no job, no plan. But I had a choice. I could continue trying to prove them wrong, or I could construct a life that rendered their opinions meaningless. I made coffee, opened my sketchbook, and drew a single line, the outline of a small home. I didn't know it yet, but that line was the first step toward everything I would become. The first weeks after the job loss blended into a blur. Cold coffee, rejection emails stacking, and the quiet so sharp it made the refrigerator hum feel like company. I applied everywhere. Small engineering firms, design studios, architectural offices. The city felt frozen, as if waiting for me to break the silence and build something that could no longer be ignored. Denver was slowly emerging from the economic slump, and jobs were scarce. One afternoon, I found myself in a little cafe called Harlan's Corner. The place had seen better days: faded walls, dim lighting, scratched tables, and the lingering smell of over-roasted coffee. I chose a quiet corner, laptop half on, half off, pretending to work while thinking about how long I could keep up the illusion that everything was okay. The owner, a man in his 60s with streaks of gray in his hair and hands marked by paint, approached. "You're Wendy Bennett, right? The engineer." I looked up startled. "I used to be," I replied. He smiled softly. "Used to, huh? Well, I could really use someone like you. This cafe's barely holding on, and I've got about $1,000 left to make it right. Want to help?" $1,000? Barely enough for rent. Yet something in his genuine tone made me nod. "Sure. I'll help." For the next few weeks, I practically lived in that cafe. I repainted the walls, reorganized the furniture, rewired the lights, and created a layout that made the cramped space feel open and inviting. I repurposed old wood for the counter, hung simple pendant lamps, and covered one wall in mirrors to catch more light. When we finished, Harlan stood in the center, eyes shining. "It's alive again," he whispered. "You've got real talent, kid." A week later, a small local magazine ran a feature: a forgotten cafe revived by a local engineer. There I was, paint-streaked jeans and all, smiling quietly behind the counter. Overnight, my inbox exploded. People wanted me to redesign their small shops, even homes. I had no company, no team, just a notebook and a handful of tools, but I said yes. One of the jobs took me west of Denver to renovate an old brick home for a retired soldier. The moment I arrived, I met the man inspecting the foundation, a tall, broad engineer named Ethan Walker. "You're the designer?" he asked. "Yes. And you're here to make sure it doesn't fall apart?" He chuckled. "Then we'll get along just fine." We did more than get along. Ethan was patient, steady, and deliberate. Someone whose presence made quiet feel safe. We worked side by side for weeks, measuring, debating, and sketching ideas. Sometimes hours would pass without a word, just the rhythm of hands and tools. One afternoon, while I crouched on the floor redrawing a layout, he handed me a water bottle. "You lose track of everything when you're building," he said. "I know," I murmured without looking up. He hesitated. "You look at a house like it has a soul." I laughed softly. But later, in bed, his words echoed in my mind. When the project wrapped, Ethan invited me to dinner near Sloan's Lake. Over bread and wine, we talked about more than blueprints: fear, failure, and the quiet thrill of starting over. I shared how I'd lost my job, walked away from my family. He didn't pity me. "You don't need their approval," he said. "You've already built something they can't touch." For the first time in years, someone truly saw me. Not the person my family dismissed, but the one I had fought to become. Weeks later, he called. "I have a wild idea," he said. "Ever thought about designing a house that runs entirely on its own energy? Sustainable, small, independent." My heart stopped. That was the dream I'd buried long ago. "Yes," I admitted. "Then maybe it's time," he replied. We dubbed it the Eco Home Project. Months later, we discovered a 5-acre plot in Oregon overlooking the ocean. The owner, an older man with gentle eyes, shared a quiet sorrow. "I planned to build a home here once," he said. "But my wife passed before I could." I explained our plan. He nodded slowly. "$75,000. I'll lower the price. You'll make it something worth living in." Ethan covered the rest. "No strings," he said. "Just a partnership." We pitched a tent on the clearing where pine trees whispered and the ocean breeze carried salt and rain. Every morning, coffee on a small stove. Every day, labor until our hands bled and bodies ached. We cleared stones, leveled the land, and built the foundation by hand. I named it Evergreen Cabin, 600 square feet of sunlit wood, solar panels, rainwater collection, reclaimed barnwood. Everything sustainable. Everything crafted from what the world had cast aside. Just like me. Some days exhaustion nearly won. My hands cracked, my muscles protested. Yet each evening as the cabin rose before us, I felt a strange, profound sense of rebuilding. Both the home and myself. By the 10th month, the cabin was complete. Pale wood, expansive windows, a porch opening to the sea. In the sunlight, it almost seemed to pulse with life. I took a single photo, shared it online. Built this myself. By morning it had gone viral. Messages poured in. You've inspired me. You turned pain into something beautiful. For the first time the world saw me, the woman I'd fought to become. One quiet May morning, sun streaming through the trees and lavender blooming along the porch, the screech of tires on gravel broke the calm. A silver BMW skidded to a stop. The door swung open and there she was. Jessica, 2 years older, perfectly composed yet trembling. Her white dress fluttered in the breeze. "Dad, you need to come here now," she said, voice shaking. I stepped off the porch, still holding my gardening gloves. "Jess, what's wrong?" Her eyes swept over the cabin, the solar panels, the wildflowers, the forest beyond. She froze. "You live here." They said I had nothing left, that I had vanished from life. I smiled faintly. Apparently they were mistaken. For a brief moment her confidence faltered. "You created this on your own with support," I said. "The people who believed in the one your parents labeled a failure." She swallowed, her throat tight. "I didn't realize. I didn't." Her voice wavered. "After my divorce I returned home," I continued. "They still cover all my expenses. Mom warns me, don't be like your sister." And I obey. The wind stirred, tossing strands of her hair across her face. She seemed small, fragile, like the girl I once shielded from our parents' fights. Anger had faded. Sadness remained. We'd grown up in the same house but learned opposing lessons. I was taught to endure without love. She was taught to rely entirely on it. She traced her fingers along the cabin's wooden walls. "You have everything," she murmured. "And I don't even know who I am anymore." I looked at her gently. "Then stop living for them. Live for yourself." She let out a shaky laugh. Easier said than done. We lingered in silence until she whispered, "They're coming." When the SUV arrived a few minutes later, I already knew the script. My father stepped out first, veins darkening at his neck. Mom followed, trembling behind him. "Where did you get the money?" Dad demanded. "You expect me to believe you built all this alone?" I set my gloves down, wiped my hands on my jeans and met his gaze. "From the moment you called me worthless," I said steadily, "I began accumulating something you could never take from me. My effort, my resilience, my peace." He blinked, puzzled. "Every insult, every comparison to her, that was currency," I continued, gesturing to the cabin. "And this is what I invested it in." Mom's voice shook. "We only wanted what was best for you." I laughed softly, not bitterly. "No. You wanted what made you look best." Dad's jaw tightened as he scanned the walls, searching for a flaw. "You built this to humiliate us." "No," I said quietly. "I built this to survive you." The air was heavy, filled only with the distant murmur of the ocean. Ethan emerged from the cabin, calm as ever, wiping his hands on a rag. He nodded politely to my parents and stood beside me, a steadfast, silent presence. For the first time I noticed a flicker in my father's eyes. Not anger, not pride, but shame. "Did you do all this for revenge?" he asked finally. I shook my head. "Revenge would mean I still care what you think. I don't." The wind carried the scent of pine and lavender between us. Jessica watched from the side, tears gathering in her eyes. Dad's shoulders slumped. "We were wrong," he said. Mom quietly sobbed into her hands. "I didn't need to confront you to find freedom," I said softly. "I'm already free." They left shortly after, the SUV disappearing along the gravel road. Silence reclaimed the forest. My heart raced, not with anger but with release. Ethan draped an arm around me. "You okay?" I looked at the trees bathed in golden light. For the first time I said yes. A week later, a cream envelope arrived with no return address. My father's careful handwriting spelled my name. Inside was a letter and a photograph of our old home with a for sale sign. His words were unsteady. "We loved you the wrong way, through fear, through comparison. We're starting over. And for the first time we are proud of you." I didn't respond. I didn't cry. I went outside, the scent of pine and rain thick in the air, and planted a young tree near the porch, a new beginning rooted in calm. Ethan stood beside me, holding a small walnut box carved from the first tree we cut for the cabin. Inside rested a simple wooden ring. "Will you keep building with me?" he asked quietly. I laughed through tears. Only if we draw the plans together. As the sun sank behind the trees, I wrote one last line in my journal. They gave her $150,000. They gave me silence, but silence became my foundation. The wind moved through the pines like a promise. Sometimes the strongest form of victory isn't paying them back. It's showing that you're thriving without their validation. My parents' silence taught me everything about resilience, boundaries, and peace. If you've ever been doubted, I hope this story reminds you that you can construct a life from scratch, one that no one can dismantle.